from playing b4. The first question you should ask is what happens if I do it anyway, and I think black can and should play b4 all the same, because white cannot take it as now. He cannot take with the queen since the knight is hanging, and cannot take with the knight on pain of mate on a1, and this is looking very bad very fast. So I quite like Josh's move, e5, which is sort of accepting that white is going to come under some fire, and it says, you know what, I can't really defend my queen side very easily, so I'm going to break through first in the center while black is unable to defend himself. And so here, for example, black probably should play b4. If he moves, like, this knight is nowhere good to go. If knight d5, white will take a pawn and be basically winning. So I think that black should play b4 to counterattack white's knight, and point out that if white's knight were to move away, then the knight on f6 gains the d5 square, which will be very helpful. But following something like ef6, sorry, not knight f6, he has to play bc3 first. And then queen c3, knight f, queen takes c3, knight takes f6. Here I think white is more or less okay. He seems fine. Like, he can play d5 or bishop g5 or something. I don't love queen c6 because now he's opening a lot of lines on the queen side and losing a lot of time doing so. But for example, d5 looks okay to me for white. So this would have been, I think, decent. But after d5, b4, of course, white goes into this mess. But now the problem is white has won a pawn, but his king is going to face very serious problems in the coming moves. But I actually think rook c8 is a mistake, because this rook on h8 needs to figure out what it ever wants to do. And I think the best move is bishop g7. The point is that once black castles, he can move the queen away and put his rooks on b8 and c8 later. So for example, after castle, let's say white gets his queen out of dodge and starts to launch his own attack with h4. How do you guys think black should proceed now? So Jeremy says queen c7, Arco says queen c7. This looks like a pretty good move to me, and black is ready to play. He will put his rooks on c8 and b8, which I think is significantly better than taking the a8 rook and placing it on c8, because then if this rook goes to c8 instead, then the rook on f8 becomes pretty bad. So that's why I don't like committing to rook c8 so early here. I would rather start with bishop g7. But okay, so we got this business, and now black played h5, which is an interesting move that both prevents white from playing g4 and bishop h6. But okay, so white instead got ready in the center, and now black castled, bishop h6, bishop a4. And I think that white has defended this pretty well. And now white has a pretty healthy extra pawn, but maybe knight d5 wasn't the best decision. Let's see. What do people think of this move, knight d5? It's a controversial move. Is it good or is it not good, or are we not sure? So Josh is saying e5, but how do we get the pawn back? This I don't think is great. No, but so Josh is suggesting this move knight e4. And the problem is now, again, this knight is getting exchanged. And I don't think we want it exchanged, because if we think about this position, this knight is actually a pretty good defender of the queen side. And we're exchanging it for the knight on f6, who is pretty thoroughly dominated by these pawns. So my instinct for what white should be doing here is to move queen g5. And the point of this, there's a few points of this move. But first and foremost, I would like to play e5. I think white's best plan is to open the center so that black will have trouble keeping the queens on the board. Because as soon as we get the queens off, the endgame is going to be very good for white. But this is also exactly another one of those kinds of positions where we're realizing just how bad this rook on f8 is. If you could imagine that rook stood on a8 instead, it could come to b8 very easily and be good. But because black already committed early to playing rook ac8, he sort of left himself with a bad rook. But here I like to move queen g5 with the plan of playing e5 next to open the center. Let's suppose black says, you know what, I see your plan and I'm not going to allow it. I'm going to play e5 myself. What should white do now? Josh, I think we have a better move than that. Yes, Jeremy, well spotted. Queen takes f6. This forces mass exchanges, and at the end of all this, white is going to have a clean extra pawn in the endgame, which should be pretty easily enough to win. But if black doesn't play e5, I don't see how he will stop white from playing e5, which is going to be a very, very annoying move to deal with and should leave white in very good shape. So this looks very bad for black. Instead, knight d5, I'm not thrilled by. So rook fe8. And now, still, it seems like white ended up getting a pretty good position. Black playing queen b7 and queen back to c7 is not very inspiring. And here it seems like black actually won the game pretty quickly. So let's see how this went down. So h takes g4, fg4, queen c5. Okay, and so here white decided to go all in for the mating attack. That's probably a fine decision, but to me, I would think that with the extra pawn, it's unnecessary. I would think for white, I actually see a really interesting move for white. Let's see if anybody can come up with a decent idea for him. You guys do that. I'll just be right back. I have to blow my nose. Okay, so let's see what people have come up with. Wow, someone wants rook e6. That's feisty. I think that's a bit unnecessary. We don't need to be sacrificing rooks here. That is not quite what I had in mind. So Eli is saying king b1, which is a pretty sensible looking move to me. But what I actually came up with here, Josh is saying c3. I think this is a very sensible move. White wants, essentially here, all white really needs to do to win the game is make sure that his king is safe and secure. c3 is a good place to start because he can play rook d2, overprotect the b2 pawn, which overprotects the c3 pawn, and it's very hard to see how black is ever going to do any damage to white's king structure. But another move that I had in mind was to just start taking a walk. If we think about this king, if this king simply walks over to g1, he'll be safe as can be. And I don't think black can stop him from walking that way. And ultimately then, white will be able to... I mean, I'm thinking about white's extra pawn. It's on the queen side. White's basic plan to win the game eventually is some kind of like c4, b4, c5. Obviously, this is not going to happen when white's king is still on the queen side. He's going to get torn to shreds. But if white were to hide his king away with king f2 and then with something like king d2, let's say, hide the king on a square like f2 or g1, and then start playing b4, c4, rook c1, and then mobilizing his extra pawn, I think this would be very good for him. The only way this could go wrong is if at some point on white's, because in order for white to get his king to g1, he's going to have to walk through the center to get there. And the only question is, can black somehow hurt white when his king is in the center before it can run to safety on g1? And it looks like the answer is no. I don't really see how the king can get harassed on a square like e2 on the way to f2 and g1. So I think this would be a very reasonable plan. I think Josh's plan with c3 also makes a lot of sense, but I think g4 was a bit impatient because now we see that here, after queen c5, white's losing control a little bit. For example, if he tries to trade queens, he has two hanging pawns, which means things are going to start to get tough. Although, honestly, even here, I still think he's pretty close to winning after bishop e2. So instead, though, the game ended abruptly as white blundered with bishop takes b5. But if white had played Josh's move c3 here, I think he's doing pretty well. But still, after something like takes and queen c4, it might not be that easy to put the game away. I think you probably have to trade queens here. I wouldn't want to allow queen coming to a2. That I think will be too much to deal with. But an endgame like this is not so easy because despite the extra pawn, white has some weaknesses on the king side that will require some attention. In any case, luckily for black, white did not find any of this and instead took on b5 and got mated. So yeah, this was an interesting game, but I think that white sort of played well but lost control after playing g4 and could have been a bit more patient with either Josh's plan of c3, rook d2 to bolster the queen side, or my plan of running the king to safety on f2 on g1. In any case, any questions about this game, or should we move on to the next one? All right, so let's go back to the beginning.
Hey, Sam.
Hi, Russ.
So some of these games are very long. Feel free to cut it at 15, 10, whatever it's non-instructional. And then let me know if you want maybe kids to submit games or how you want to get games, like what you're looking for. And then I can try to get you better games. But I just put a couple together for this week.
I think this last game was very interesting.
Yeah, you know, that game was played by Showtime. That's his name. His name is Showtime.
Like the TV channel?
Hi.
Like the TV channel?
Sam, Show won our K3 ICN championship this year. He won 5-0.
Wow, congratulations. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
this next game we're looking at is I just had to copy paste it into the same window, but this next game is Noah against Julian. So this one starts off as a Smith-Morra gambit, which is not a great opening, but well, let's see how it goes. Okay, black fell for a trick and white didn't punish him. What should white play here? Yes, Jeremy, that is correct. Bang, bishop takes f7 is bad news. After king takes f7, there is knight g5 check. White will get his piece back and win immediately. So black cannot play bishop g4 like this. He will get crushed. A good line for black is to play a6 here, which is preparing to play knight f6. The reason is if you play knight f6 right now, there is this line e5. Now, if you take with the knight on e5, this loses. What should white play here? Yep, Jeremy with the right answer again. Bang, take f7, and the queen is lost on d8. But the point is that after knight f6, e5, if you take with the pawn, which is better, now bishop f7 doesn't work because the queen is defended. But here the problem is, what is white's best move in this position? Think carefully, guys. Don't just guess. White has a very strong move that basically forces black to resign. Yes, Jeremy. Knight b5 comes, and this is a disaster because knight c7 is on the way and seems basically impossible to prevent. Excuse me. Bad allergies. Yeah, I think black can sort of survive with rook b8. But if he plays king d7 to try to stop it, this is actually checkmate already, which is kind of funny. But so this move a6, I think, is kind of clever. And the point is that after castles, knight f6, now black can safely play this endgame because after e5, d takes e5, queen d8, knight d8, if white is unable to go knight b5, of course he can take his pawn back very easily, but he was down 2 pawns and now he's only down 1 pawn. And black can complete his development easily with g6, bishop g7, and castle, for example, when I think he should have a pretty comfortable pawn up. e6 is also fine here, and black is doing quite well. So this is very good for him, so white probably should not play e5. But the point is that you played a6, which seems like a slow move, but this lets you play knight f6, and once you play knight f6, what should black play here? What does black play now? Yes, Eli, that is correct. Bishop g4. Now and only now, because we are not scared of bishop takes f7 check, thanks to the bishop being defended by the net on f6. And here black is completing his development with a very comfortable game, and he should be pleasantly better. So instead, though, black played bishop g4, and white didn't punish him. And after a6, white had a second chance to play bishop takes f7, but didn't do so. And at the end of this here, I believe that rook c8 is a mistake. What should black play instead? Yes, Josh, that is correct. Knight a5, and black has a very comfortable position. After queen b4, black can probably maybe take f3 first, but we will get something like this, and black should be quite fine. For example, after knight f6. I am not scared of queen c6 check because black has knight d7, and he can easily complete his development with moves like bishop e7, queen c8, and castle, when black looks very much fine to me. Instead, though, black played rook c8, and now things are going to start going wrong. Knight g5 is probably a pretty good start, and stuff starts hanging here. But at this point, white is a pretty healthy pawn up, and once the queens come off with queenside pawns like this, it gets very bad for black. So I think this game's actually already more or less over. I mean, maybe knight g5 was not strictly necessary, and white could have taken a6 directly, but essentially here white took back his sacrificed pawn and then another. Now he has an extra pawn, but in addition to that, he has two connected pass pawns on the queen side, which lets him win the game very routinely. I don't love queen to b5. I would much prefer the move queen b6, because white is able to play bishop b5 or knight b5 next. And of course, we're not scared of bishop takes g5 because the rook on c7 is loose. So this looks absolutely finished after queen b6. For example, if h6, knight b5, I think black sort of has to resign. Queen b5 was not great, but even here, I think with the queens off the board like this, black's position is essentially hopeless, and now he's down 2 clean pawns. So Smith-Morra Gambit often leads to fast games because either white crushes black like he did here, or black will take an extra pawn and get away with it pretty quickly. But yeah, I don't think there's too much else to look at in this game, so I guess we can move on to the next one. Let's just assume white won. Seems like it. Okay, so I'm gonna cut this and move on to the next game. So this next game is gonna be Elliot against Anushka. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. Okay, so who knows what this opening is called? It's not the chopped liver, it's the fried liver. My friend told me a story that his girlfriend does not play chess, but she had to teach a chess class when he was sick or something. So he taught her the lesson to give and said, okay, this is what you teach. And then she didn't realize it was called the fried liver attack and instead called it the chopped liver attack the whole class, which was very funny. But yeah, so this is called the fried liver. And here, this move queen e2 I don't think is very good. White should instead play bishop b5 check. But I'm not sure exactly for what reason, but it seems like this went wrong for white very fast. So yeah, this already here after queen takes d5, the position looks very good for black because he has a bishop pair, a bigger stake in the center, and a lead in developments. But white tried to grab a pawn to have something for his suffering, but this is not going to work. After bishop d6, white's queen is already almost trapped. I'm even wondering if black can do something wacky like bishop h3. It's probably unnecessary. Maybe white is okay after queen takes f7, but after bishop d6, this position is really falling apart. If white were to retreat his queen, there will be queen takes g2. and black is already equalizing material for now and winning a knight on g5 next, all while developing with a gain of tempo the whole time. So this move, queen e2, really has gone wrong. After c4, here black decided to make a huge mess with queen takes g2, which I do think is a good decision, but even if he was somewhat insecure about that, after bishop takes c7 and knight takes d5, I think black is basically winning in this endgame because he has a much better structure, a big lead in development, a healthy bishop pair, extra space, and this looks utterly horrendous for white. He also, I don't think, can stop this knight from coming somewhere unfortunate like b4 or f4. He can only control one of those squares in the coming moves, which means this knight will invade to even d3, and I think that white is basically done for. But queen takes g2 is even more violent, and now black takes a rook, and I guess here bishop g4 check is fine. And then at the end of this, white got brutally checkmated. So yeah, if you're gonna essentially, if we think about what happened in this game, white played knight g5, moving the same piece twice in the opening, and then basically didn't get anything for it. He's moving the same piece. So essentially, what we've seen up to this point is white has not moved any of these pawns up. He has not developed any of these pieces, and he's moved his queen 1, 2, 3 times. He's moved this knight twice. He's moving all of his pieces too many times, and he's not getting anything for it, while black is developing very quickly. So who knows what the best move is here after knight a5? Yeah, so people are getting this right. The best move is bishop b5 check. And then after c6, white faces a lot of the same problems that we were seeing, but at least he has a clean extra pawn. And in addition, this knight on a5, which in the game was able to exchange off for that bishop, this knight now cannot exchange so easily, and it's actually a really lousy piece. It's stuck on the side of the board and doesn't have a great way to rejoin the game. So I still think these positions are okay for black, but it's so Eli is saying why bishop d3. The reason is that if you bring the bishop back to e2, that this knight on g5 is going to get booted around mercilessly. So for example, after h6, knight f3, e4, this knight is going to get sent potentially all the way back to g1, which is a very bad sign. And here, because I think there is a line knight e5, queen d4, and then this knight is almost trapped and black is getting a huge position. So, but with bishop d3, the point is that the knight is able to retreat to the e4 square. Yeah, because here, the point is now if h6, knight e4, white has everything under control and he should be better. But black has other ways of playing to try to punish white for putting the bishop here. So the best way now, for example, is knight d5, knight f3, bishop d6, castle, castle, and after rook e1, f5. This is the kind of position where this bishop on d3 is a little bit awkward because you would want to play d3 for white to stop black from playing e4 and also help develop the c1 bishop. But because we had to put the bishop on d3 to sort of not let this g5 knight get booted into oblivion, white's position is very awkward here. I think if he lets black play e4, he will get crushed. So he sort of has to take this pawn. But after queen f6, knight f3, and now g5, black is ready for g4 next. And essentially, he's down 2 pawns, but he's going to launch a kingside attack, arguing that these pieces are just not way too slow to join the game. And this knight on f3 will get kicked, and the bishop on d3 is awkward. And I think, despite the 2 pawns down, I think black has full compensation and good attacking chances in the coming moves. So this is, yeah.
Oh, sorry. If you were done with this line, there was a game in the fried liver yesterday that I had a question about. If
Oh, okay. What's that game?
After b takes c6, white played bishop a4.
Okay.
Which I known to not be such a good move. So I always knew there was h6, knight f3, and then e4.
Yes.
And I know that like if knight e5, there's queen d4, but white played queen e2 before knight e5, which I was wondering what's best for black here.
So this is just me. It's not the computer, but what's wrong with this?
That's what was played in the game. But now one thing is if knight e5, then if queen to d4.
as well.
then bishop takes d6, and knight's going to be forking the queen and the bishop.
Right. So guys, the point is what Coach Logan was saying is if you start with knight e5 here, the tactics are going to work heavily in black's favor because after queen g4, white has 2 hanging pieces. Now he can take on c6, and it seems like white is 2 pawns up, but his problem is his knight is trapped after queen c5. And white will lose a piece and the game shortly afterwards. But because white is including the move queen e2 first, now if black were to break the pin with bishop e7, white would be able to go into this same position because at the end of it, the knight might look trapped, but it now can exchange for the bishop on e7.
That's actually what happened in the game. I think the engine liked bishop e6 for black, but I don't
Right. Yeah, so that would make a lot of sense. The computer is saying that that bishop e6 is the best move, which also breaks the pin, but does not leave this bishop on a vulnerable square. So after knight e5, queen d4 now, if we see the same variation, once again, this knight ends up getting trapped, and it is not able to take a bishop for it, so he will lose a piece. And after bishop e6, that means this knight is going to have to go all the way back to g1, which is a very bad sign. And black should be doing very well. So does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so good question from Coach Logan, but let's move on and see the next game. So this is between Miles and Aliyah. Oh, someone has a point. Queen a6. Queen a6 right now, they think black can quite comfortably take this guy. And white is not getting nearly enough for the piece. So later after queen, sorry, at which moment do we want queen a6? Here you want it? This is where you want queen a6. No? Where do we want queen a6?
Do you mind if I unmute?
When the queen is on c4 and the knight looks trapped, queen a6.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, so here bishop e6, knight e5, queen d4. Yeah, so the problem is the knight is trapped. The knight's trapped. That doesn't necessarily mean it can't be defended. It just means it can't move. So sure, you can defend it, but I will simply attack it again. And this doesn't help.
Knight a5?
Oh, I see. Okay, hang on. Let me think for a second and be an intelligent human being. Okay, I see it. Bishop c8. And then you will have to play queen a4, and then bishop d7 wins the knight. Okay, so it's a good question, but it seems like if black is careful, he wins. But yeah, so let's get rid of this and look at the next game, which was a d4 game. Good job for somebody adding some variety. So we get queen's gambit accepted. Knight c3 is not a great move. Who knows what black should play here? This is a game between Miles and Aliyah. Yeah, so Coach Logan is right. Basically, when the queen's gambit accepted, when you play d takes c4, you're not going to be able to save this pawn. White will take it back. The question becomes, can you do something to break down white's center before he does? And the answer here is going to be yes, because now black can play e5 to counterattack white's center. If white were to take this pawn, black takes on d1, and if knight d1, the e4 pawn hangs. I think black even will check first, and then take on e4 next. And if king takes d1, knight g4 comes, and white will lose back the e5 pawn, and black has broken down white's space advantage in the center. So normally white doesn't allow this and instead plays e5, but this also isn't totally ideal because it means he's weakened some key squares after knight d5, and I think black is more or less okay here. But instead here, black played b6, and this lets white take the whole center without any discussion. As a result, white should be clearly better. But bishop d3 is a kind of wimpy move. Let's see if anybody can find a better one for white. So Josh suggests f3. That's a very strategic move. which looks quite reasonable to me. I think you can be more violent than that, but so Elliot has suggested queen c2, but then the d4 pawn will hang, which I don't love. F4 I don't think we want because e4 will hang, but so the move for me that makes the most sense is d5, because I really want to stop black from developing this bishop on f8, and this will prevent him from playing e6. So I think this looks very bad for black already. I have no idea how he wants to proceed, and I think he's already clearly worse. This looks good. So Coach Logan is asking if black can go c6. I think the answer has to be no. I mean, I will keep developing, and I don't think this move c6 helps very much because you cannot pressure the center. For example, after cd5, what should white play here? Yeah, Josh, we'll go back to f3 next. What should white play here, people? Yes, Josh, bishop b5 check. And then after black blocks it, we can play e5, and then black resigns because he gets crushed. The center blows up and white takes all the space, and this is no bueno. So yeah, that looks utterly crushing. Black doesn't necessarily have to take on d5, but otherwise I'm not really sure what this move c6 did for him. And it all seems to be going downhill pretty severely. So yeah, let's, Josh has suggested the move f3, and well, I don't think this is as direct. After e6, it seems like black's not gonna simply die, but after white develops with knight ge2 and bishop e3 and castle, I think white will be pleasantly better with a nice space advantage. I mean, there's a difference between clearly better and essentially crushing, so I would think d5 is a better move. But this does seem very comfortable for white. He has a nice space advantage in the center. This bishop on b7 is quite poor, and it seems like very unpleasant for black. So instead, though, white played bishop d3, and this is a very quiet move, which I think is a bit ill-advised. And now after knight f3, bishop b4, white's center is sort of coming under fire, and I really dislike bishop g5 because this will allow black to force some piece exchanges, which he desperately needs when he has less space. Queen a4 check, as Josh is giving, I think is an excellent move. This will force black to play knight c6, and now I believe bishop b5 wins the game on the spot. I don't see how black will save it. He seems to be losing material. So this looks over. So Arco is saying queen d7, but there will follow knight e5, and black is going to lose material, heavy material at that. Queen a4 is Puzzle Rush's favorite tactic. I didn't know that, but cool. Yeah, so I definitely remember a game where I blundered queen a4 check from my opponent, and he didn't see it, and then I went on to win, and he was very mad afterwards. So instead, though, after bishop g5, here I think black could have greatly increased his defensive chances by taking on c3 and then playing h6, because this will force white to take the knight. In fact, I actually think he should have done it before castling. I think he should take c3 directly. The reason for that is that after h6, I'm a little bit concerned about bishop h4, and then after g5, I think that here black is quite happy to take the pawn on e4 because this is clearly not going to work. But if black had already castled and could not play moves like rook g8 to g6 to save it, then I would think that it's going to be dangerous. What did it feel like to win the U.S. championship? Well, I would tell you, but I think Russ would fire me, so I'll keep it to myself. But let's just say it felt good. Yeah. The words I would normally use to describe it, I think Russ might fire me for using these words around children. This, I think, taking c3 would have made a lot of sense here to play h6. So white is forced to give up the bishop pair immediately. And I think black's still a little bit worse here because of white's extra space, but I could sort of imagine black getting castled and then playing c5 to put some pressure on white center, and he's probably not doing too badly. So instead, though, the way the game went here, black played bishop back to e7, which means that white is going to secure his central advantage, which is not good news for black. But I think queen b3, as white played, is a very bad score for the queen, and that she would be better on e2, or even c2 maybe. But here, white wants to centralize his pieces like so. After queen b3, knight c6, now the center is coming under fire, which I think white is none too happy about. But it still seems like he has it under control. But here, I see an interesting option for black. What would you guys want to play with black here? So Kaya is saying knight g4. That looks like an interesting move. Shao is saying knight g4 as well. That looks very sensible. Yeah, so I kind of like knight g4. It looks like a good idea to chase this bishop, but I'm not sure. For example, after knight g4, e5, no, I can't play e5. Black will take it. But let's say rook a d1, and we get some position like this one. I'm still a bit concerned here. I think white will play e5 and launch a kingside attack, but essentially here, white has a space advantage, which we're not happy about. And one good thing that we can be doing is trying to trade pieces. And so I think knight g4 makes a lot of sense, trying to, as we saw, exchange pieces. But I'm curious if we can get away with this move when I think that black is going to get some trades in a way that will make his defensive task quite a bit easier. He's broken down white's space advantage in the center by temporarily sacrificing a piece. And after this move, e5, but I see a refutation. Let's see if you guys can figure out, how does white win here? I'll be right back, just a second. So, yeah, so the best move is knight takes d4, as people are showing. So the point is now black doesn't have a great way to pressure this knight, because if e5 there is knight f5, and then the bishop will hang on e7 at the end. But the other way you could pressure the knight is c5, and white has a good move here. What should he play? Yes, Jeremy, knight takes e6, and now white will win a pawn. After fe6, queen e6 check, and then rook a d1 or something, and white has a clean extra pawn. So this idea knight takes d4 seems to not work. Josh was suggesting knight a5 followed by c5. That makes a lot of sense as well. So black did play knight a5, and here I think white should have put the queen on c2, which overprotects the e4 pawn and prepares for e5, which threatens the h7 pawn. So there followed queen d1, bishop b4, bishop g5, and eventually we got this kind of thing that I was describing. And here I think it's all going to come down to whether black can get away with g5, but I think the answer is no. I think here he's going to get checkmated. That's why I wanted to play g5 before castling, because if you can imagine black's king back on e8 here and his rook on h8, he could easily challenge this bishop with rook g8, and he wouldn't have to worry. Like, now his king is very hard to defend, and this looks basically lost. Queen f3 is coming. So king h8, e5. King h8 actually is a mistake because it allows e5, but I don't know what else black can play. It's hard to suggest a move. I think black will lose in the coming moves, but let's suppose he were to play c5 or something. What should white play here? Be careful. Don't make a boo-boo. So Jeremy says queen f3 seems like a good move. Yeah, queen f3 looks like the best way to To continue the attack, black must play king g7 and now say queen f4. And I don't see how black is going to stop e5 next, which should win the game in short order. What is wrong with playing e5? Yes, Jeremy. Queen d5, break the pin with the gain of tempo. White is not in time to take this knight, and as such, we'll have to play something like f3, and then once black's knight survives, he has reasonable defensive chances. But instead, here, black played king h8, and now this queen d5 trick does not work because bishop takes f6 comes with check. So black is lost here no matter how he plays, but he does have a tricky move. Let's see if you guys can figure out what he should do to make the game as difficult for white as possible. Yes, Josh, that's correct. Rook g8. Now, how does white win? What is white's winning continuation? Give a full line. Next, 2 moves for white. White has to make 2 more moves before black resigns, not 1. So, okay, bishop takes f6, but what happens then?
Am I allowed to unmute myself?
Yeah, okay, so we got it right. Bishop takes f6 and queen h5. Everyone's got this. The point is that if you were to take back with the pawn directly, there is rook takes g2 check, and this is going to be a problem. Check, and white loses. Here, check, and rook g3, and it's time to resign. But as long as white manages to include queen h5 check so that after king g7, he takes the queen with check and does not give black time to take on g2, white will win routinely. So yeah, tough game for black. I think things went wrong here. He could have tried c5 at this point to pressure white's center a little bit better, but in general, white got to take the entire center, and then black wasn't able to really do anything about it. So and then black got crushed on the king side. All right, so I think we have time for one more game before we do some brief Q&A at the end, and then we'll call it quits. So let's see what the next game we have sent is. This is Emma against Arco. Actually, that's a long game and it's a draw, so I think actually we'll skip that one. We have, okay, here we have Victoria against Eleanor. That one's a little bit shorter. Let's do that. So let's go to the beginning here. Okay, so this one starts off as a Chigorin. Is the Chigorin a good opening or a bad opening? Yeah, let's not play the Chigorin. This is a no-no. A good rule of thumb is whenever you have a position where you have placed your knight on c6 before without playing c5, or your knight on c3 with white without playing c3, the only way you can justify this is to get the move e5 in for black or e4 in for white. And here, as we'll clearly see, after bishop f4, black will not be able to play e5. So c3 from white is not great, though. White should play e3 and then play for c4 next. And I think white is very pleasantly better already. But c3 is a little bit vegetarian and not the best, because now as we see what happens is this position here, for instance, I think this would be a good moment for black to play e5. And basically, as I said, if black gets e5 in, then this knight on c6 is justified. And if black doesn't get e5 in, then the knight won't be justified. And here, because black has played e5, I think he will be okay, or she will be okay. Instead of this, white could have played a bit better with e3. And if bishop g4, say we play bishop e, maybe start with knight bd2 to make sure that e5 cannot come. And after something like this, this looks very uncomfortable for black. Maybe bishop b5 is an even better way of doing it so that e5 can't come. And this looks exceptionally unpleasant for black. But instead, we got this business going on. And here, if black gets e5 through, she should be okay. But it looks like she missed the chance. This would have been the last chance to play e5, I imagine. And I think this looks okay for black. But once h6 happens and queen c2, Now e5 cannot come, and in fact here black also blundered a pawn. So this looks now very bad. And white routinely reaches a winning endgame. Castling queenside is unnecessary, but there's also nothing wrong with it. But rook h2, I don't like this plan. So clearly I think the plan with this move is to double rooks on the h-file to try to give mate, but that's not going to be easy to do without queens. And also, we don't really need to give mate because we have an extra pawn. So let's see if anybody can find a better plan for white than that. So Josh has suggested g4, g5. That makes some sense. I think black will meet g4 with f6. But yeah, so I like Jeremy's move. I think that this e4, I think white should open the e-file, like get his pieces active in the center, and then essentially start trading stuff off. So for example, I guess black will take it, and then white's next moves are pretty straightforward. Rook e1, rook e2, other rook to e1, double everything on the open file, slowly but surely start to expand. Who's calling me and why do they? Random people are calling me. Hang on. Okay, sorry, my computer was ringing at me because people didn't get the memo to leave me alone while I am hanging out with all my best pals with you guys. Instead, this feels a little bit optimistic to hope that you could give mate. But knight f5 is sort of walking straight into it, so black kind of let it happen. If black had played f5, I think that sort of ruins any hope of attacking. But knight f5 is sort of begging for trouble. And then here, white even took a second pawn and then took a knight as well. So this game is, whoa. Let's not hang that rook, people. White's up a piece and 2 pawns. Save this rook, and then white wins. But after rook h3, it seems like things are a bit tougher. But white ended up winning the rook back later, and I hope white won this game. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to assume that black resigned here. In any case, interesting game. I think black could have done better by not blundering the pawn on f5, and also by making sure to get e5 through to take a bigger stake of the center than she got. Okay, any questions about this one? That one was fast, so maybe we can do one more actually. Yeah, okay, so here we've got Victoria against Ryder. So let's go back to the top. No, 0 to 1 is from the first game of the day. The result, that's it's going to say 0 to 1 at the end of every game, just because the first game was 0-1, and I'm not opening a new window for this. Okay, so here we have a London system where black has put the bishop on g7. Is this a good bishop or is this a bad bishop?
Bad.
Yeah, it's bad bishop. This is a very strong pawn chain right here, and black's bishop is biting on it. So in general, black should not put the bishop on g7 in the London system, as well as the pawn on d5. The only way you can play bishop g7 in these positions is if you leave this pawn back on d6, at which point, so for example, I mean, black played d5 on the very first move of the game, but let's suppose we saw a London system, something like this. If black puts the bishop on g7 here and is able to play d6, positions like this one are probably okay, because black can do stuff like knight fd7 and play e5. But if his pawn is on an e5, helps restrict white's dark squared bishop. But if this pawn comes up to d5, that opens this bishop and closes this one, and that's not good for black. So here after knight f6, bishop f4, black should not play g6. He should play like e6 or c5 or something. So instead, we get this situation here where black ends up with the bad bishop. And then rook fd1 and knight e4 seems like a mistake. What should white play here?
Knight takes d, e4.
Knight takes e4 seems to cause some serious problems because after d e4, knight d2, black has 2 hanging pawns and will lose one of them. So that's not good for black. Instead, white played knight f1, which is a passive move going in the wrong direction. But eventually, white managed to push through with e4. Still, at the end of all this, with black's knight coming to d5, black can't be in such bad shape. I don't love the decision to take this bishop, but it's fine. Seems like everything traded, but here, black made a boo-boo and let this pawn get taken on c4. Black should play like b5, and this should be absolutely fine. But instead, the pawn got taken, and now white should win pretty routinely. And it seems like with 2 extra pawns, white managed to put this game away. All right, so interesting games for today. Thanks to everybody for playing and sharing. And let's just make sure, yeah, white did win this game. Okay, so I'd just like to take the last few minutes for any general questions we may have had about some of these games or about chess or anything. Really, just ask me whatever you want, and I'll do my best to answer it for you. You can just turn on your microphone and talk if you have a question.
Oh yeah. What's your favorite opening?
I really like the Najdorf. It's so much fun to play with both colors. It's interesting and it's lots of fun. What do you think about the Banco Gambit? I think it's a lot better than its reputation. Everyone thinks it's horrible. It's not. It's not great. It's definitely a little bit dubious, but it's not terrible either. I've played it a couple times. I actually won a really nice game against Li Chao in the last round of some China against rest of the world match, so that was kind of cool. Other questions? What do you think about the Goring Gambit? That's like d4, e4, d4, c3 or something. It's not very good. Logan, most influential world champion. That's a tough question, but I think I would have to say Kramnik. He was the guy who really introduced very concrete, aggressive, crisp positional chess, which was something that just didn't really exist before. It always struck me that, like, for example, I would say that, you know, Kasparov, for example, there was nothing really that new about him. He just struck me as a better version of Fischer. The same way I think that Karpov was basically a better version of Petrosian. But I think Kramnik was the one who had this very clinical, very incisive strategic play that made a lot of contribution to the current understanding of chess. What is my least favorite opening? I don't know, Petrov, Berlin. Basically, something really, whenever white plays e4 and black plays something really boring in response would be my answer. Other questions? Most interesting chess player, Coach Logan. Other questions? In all seriousness, I would say Magnus is the most interesting player. He's very diverse in his understanding of the game. Favorite game, I would say if I think Kramnik was the greatest world champion or whatever, or not the greatest, but well, I beat him in his last game before he retired, so that one I quite like.
Do you mind linking that game?
Yeah, hang on just a second. Not a great game, but you know, I'll take it. Hang on. Let me. Here it is. Best tip to get better: play for the love of the game. As soon as you stop enjoying chess, you're going to stop playing well. All right, I think we have time for one more question.
Can you bring your rating up without a ton of tournaments over the year?
Yeah, I mean, the way you bring your rating up is you become a better chess player. And if you become a much better chess player, your rating is going to go up. But like a typical trend might be you get a little bit better and you go up 50 points, and you get a little bit better still, you go up another 30 points, you get a little bit better still. But if you don't have a chance to play while you're getting better, if you keep on getting better and better and better and better with no chance to play, as long as you're training right and doing the right stuff, your rating will probably go way up very quickly. Are you better at tactical positions or positional games? I try to be well-rounded. I mean, I certainly do my best to have a very balanced style. So I'd like to say that I'm about the same. if I ever feel like I'm getting much better at one kind of position, I really start studying the other one much more deeply. In any case, I think that'll do it for today. So I look forward to seeing all of you guys on Friday when we will go over some of the positions that I gave to the instructors to work on. And that should be lots of fun. Thanks everybody for the session. And I will see you all later.
Thanks, Sam.